welcome to today's Friday Superstar interview. We are absolutely delighted and excited to have a very special guest today, Mr. Steve Brown. Steve is not just a realtor from Dayton, Ohio, but Steve is the 2012 first Vice President for the National Association of REALTORS. That's NAR, the voice for real estate. It's America's largest trade association, representing 1.1 million realtors. That's all of our students, 1.1 million realtors who are all involved in all aspects of the residential and commercial real estate industries. Now, Steve Brown is a realtor for more than 35 years, co-owner of Irongate Inc. Realtors, a full-service real estate firm with 6 offices, 325 agents, and that includes everything from relocation to property management divisions, in-house mortgage, title, insurance partners. And Steve, it's our pleasure, our honor, and our privilege to have you with us today here at Harris Real Estate University. Welcome to the call, and I'm going to turn the interview over to you and Tim.
So, Steve, thank you for joining us for today's interview.
Tim, thank you, and Julie. It's really my pleasure to be here.
And just in case you guys didn't get this, Steve is the 2014 President of the National Association of REALTORS. So he is the future, quite literally, of the National Association of REALTORS leadership. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to the questions and how Steve answers the questions. He and I are going to cover a wide variety of topics. It's great to always be able to speak with someone like Steve because not only is he obviously our leader or going to be our leader in 2014, but he is also a very well-known, well-respected, top-producing real estate broker, and I'm sure he was an agent as well. So, Steve, let's just jump right into it, and let's share with them a little bit about your actual boots-on-the-street, frontline real estate experience. You sell real estate in Dayton, Ohio. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Dayton. Give them an idea what that market's like.
Sure, Tim. I am a selling broker here in Dayton. My business partner and I co-own Irongate Inc. Realtors, and both of us are selling brokers. So I literally am in the trenches, if you will, on a day-to-day basis. The market here in Dayton is really very encouraging. We think because of the mild winter that we've had here in the Dayton area, our showing activity remains more reflective of the late summer showing activity than it does the winter and late winter activity. So we're really pleased about that. Our inventory is down a bit, and sales activities are up. What is not changed, however, is our prices. Our prices remain stable. We've been in a stable price mode for about the past 3 years. Prices here in the Dayton market have varied little over the past 3-year period of time. So certainly from a buyer standpoint, it's still an excellent time to buy properties, and certainly from a mortgage standpoint, it's an extraordinary time to buy. So we're feeling very good about our market. As you probably know, Dayton went through as bad a job loss situation as any parts of the country did. But what we have found is that people still need to buy and sell property. Life happens, life changes things, and homes need to be sold, homes need to be bought. And so we've been very fortunate to go through this past recessionary time in a very healthy basis, and we think the future looks pretty bright.
Well, so, I think it's very important that our future president has a background in selling real estate. Obviously, that's important. But also selling real estate in a market like Dayton, because Julie and I sold real estate in Columbus, Ohio for about a decade. And the thing about selling real estate in a market, any Midwestern market really, is that you never really you didn't experience the bubble, right? But you're kind of suffering the pain of the deflation. Now, fortunately, we're firm believers that the real estate crash is over, and now we're on a slow road to recovery, and that the bottom may have already come and went. But the point is that you have experience with dealing with homeowners who are buying for reasons other than the hypothetical appreciation, because, Steve, as I'm sure you know, and especially the formerly frothy part of the country, the sand states, California, Nevada, Florida, really the primary way people sold real estate was, let's just be right to it, greed, right? What's this thing going to be worth in future, appreciation, that sort of thing. You never sold real estate like that in Dayton or Columbus from our personal experience. do you think that that's an important mindset shift for agents? I know you wrote an article about this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Dayton market, in fact, the Midwest market in general, never experienced, even in the best of years, a double-digit appreciation. So when you bought a home in the Midwest, certainly when you bought a home in Dayton, Ohio, just from a very practical standpoint, you were looking at staying in that home for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. Our average appreciation, this was, say, before 2006, averaged somewhere between 2% and 4% a year. So when people bought homes here, they did not necessarily buy a home just because they could flip it immediately and make a huge profit. They bought a home for all the reasons that people should buy a home, and that is a place to live, very practically speaking, but more than that, a place to create memories, a place to build your own sense of pride, and certainly a real sense of wealth. Long-term investments in real estate have always proven, statistically have proven, that someone who owns a home is better off 30 years down the road. And why is that? Because you're not buying it trying to time the market when it's high, when it's low. I don't know about you, but I've never been one that could time the stock market. I don't think that you can time the real estate market. You buy a home for all the benefits that a home provides your family, your lifestyle. It's a place to create your memories. So you're right. Buying a home here was always, I think, tempered with the notion that, yes, hopefully I won't lose money on my home, but I'm buying it because it meets my needs, my family's needs, and how I want to invest my money.
Well, exactly. And, at the end of the day, we'll always have a living expense, right? Whether you're renting or making a house payment, you're always going to have some expense for a place to call home. That's never going to change. And the nice thing about places like Dayton, well, I think this is true with almost all the country right now, there is no financial argument against buying a home. For example, in most of the country right now, I would say probably 95% of the country, you actually are going to pay less, if not the same, than market rents. Manhattan and Southern California and luxury markets obviously being the biggest exception. So the argument that you could save money by renting, especially now that if your local market is bottomed out, and like you said, Steve, with the interest rates like they are, there's really no question that this is truly going to be one of the best times to buy a house, perhaps in our lifetimes. And agents out there, as Steve just said, well, Steve, you wrote a blog article that really struck a chord with me, and how you'd been traveling as part of the National Association of REALTORS, spreading the word about home ownership. And that really what resonated with me, because it really hit to the heart of what our message is at Harris Real Estate University, that, real estate, being a realtor is an honor. You're helping someone accomplishing a goal. Are you finding that true around the world?
Well, as I mentioned in my blog, and this was a blog that I do through the National Association of REALTORS, the officers blog, and so it's easily accessed by anyone that would go to the NAR site. What surprised me? I mean, it was a real dawning for me. I always thought that it was a part of the American culture only, to this desire to own your own home, and we call it, and it's very much wrapped around the American dream, and so I have always thought that it was uniquely American. What certainly I found out in my trip to Asia, I visited Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Philippines, and it didn't matter what country I was in. It did not matter who I was talking to. It's part of, I think, someone's deepest desires to be able to own their own home, to be the master of their own property. That's obviously shelter is one of our basic needs, but this goes beyond shelter. This goes to the notion that wouldn't it be great that when I'm in my place, when I'm in my home, when I'm on my property, that I am the if you will, the master of my kingdom, the head of my household, and I can do with it as I will, obviously within the constraints of laws and zoning and so on. But that's what surprised me. It was this deep-seated desire on the part of so many people in the world to own their own home, and the notion then that this is uniquely American, I would say it's uniquely human. It's not just American. It's something that is deep-seated, I think, within all of humankind.
Well, it's in our DNA. I mean, it truly is. The desire to, if you go back and, watch the shows on the History Channel, the cavemen and all that, they're always fighting over who gets what cave, right?
Right.
I mean,
right. Location, huh?
That's right. It really is part of our core DNA. So, agents, why are we talking about this? Because those of you who are still trying to sell around the idea that someone's going to make money on a house, as Steve said, yes, that is the ultimate goal. And over time, with inflation, yeah, sure, the house will end up selling for more in most parts of the country than they paid for it. Obviously, there's lots of exceptions, but as a general rule, if they buy in stable areas have a tendency to stay stable. But beyond that, selling real estate nowadays around, this is going to go up and appreciate and all the rest of that, that won't work, mostly because buyers are completely tuned out to that message. They don't want to hear that because they were either hurt personally as a result of the real estate bubble popping, or they know someone who was. So just keep that in mind. Selling real estate doesn't have to just be based on greed. Sell it, remind them, well, why are you buying a home? What are you going to use this home for? At the end of the day, it's an emotional purchase. And so as an agent, you need to connect with those emotions so you can help your future buyers connect to those emotions as well. That's, I think, really important, because it breaks my heart to see so many agents struggling with the shift that's already taken place. It took place like 5-6 years ago, so hopefully they're figuring that out now.
So Tim, when I was in grad school, I'll never forget sitting in a lecture, and one of the people from the Federal Reserve was speaking, an economist, and it was fascinating. She said that she asked her superior if she should buy a home, and he said and she was asking him financially, is this a good move for her to make? And his answer back was, do you like it? Do you want to live there? and I've never forgotten that. And this predates this recession 20 years, honestly. So the notion of a home is, in what we sell as realtors, is something much more than an investment. If we were only selling an investment, then perhaps we should be selling equities. Perhaps we should be selling something else. But a realtor that is long-term in this business and who is ultimately very successful in this business understands the passion that the consumer has for wanting their own home and is able to relate to that in a very real way, and helping them find the place that feels like not just a house but a home. You cannot live in an equity or in a stock. That is for an investment. So a home is a different type of investment. It is an investment. It's not necessarily only a financial return, though.
That's right, and that's really the important message I think that everyone needs to really get across. And I think that it would be absolutely impossible, even to the biggest housing bears out there, and we talk with the housing bears all the time, feature them on our blog, because I always try to keep a balanced approach on the information we're putting out there, that even the biggest housing bears now have turned ever so slightly on housing, and even the ones now we're starting to see stories come out continuously from around the country, from your position, I'm sure you're seeing this as well. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think the housing bottom is here? What is your perspective today on what's going on in housing across the country?
Well, that's obviously people ask that question a lot, and understandably. I guess the first answer to that would be I would have to say that to try to understand housing, and I think from a realtor's perspective, it would be similar to asking for a national weather report. That's about as helpful when you're trying to think about buying a home in Dayton, Ohio, or in Los Angeles, or in Santa Fe, or Miami Beach, as it would be to, well, so what is the overall country's weather forecast? It's probably not very helpful. What I would tell you, Tim, is that when people ask that question, it's very important to consult, I think, a local realtor expert in your given markets, because what we're finding now is that the markets are varying. I think there's a lot of optimism in the marketplace. Miami, Florida, Dade County had, up until through 2010, had a 6-year inventory of housing in Miami Beach. Last year, investors, literally international investors and local investors, absorbed that market to the point now that they are looking at a 6-month inventory of housing in and around Dade County. So that is you would say that the market there is pretty fantastic to absorb all of that inventory. What is still not moved, though, in that area are prices. Prices are still pretty stable. They're not going up, they're not going down, but we're not seeing an appreciation, which you would think we would if inventory decreases, buyers increase. There should be an increase in pricing, but it's not happening yet. It will, undoubtedly it will. But so you've got Miami, Florida, you've got Dayton, Ohio, where we've seen stable prices for the last 3 years in our marketplace. Again, our inventory is shrinking a bit. Sales are up, but prices are stable. They're not escalating. So I would tell you that as people feel more and more confident in the marketplace in general, they feel more confident that they will not only have a job, but they'll be able to retain their job. And more people they see more growth, more headlines. In Dayton, we saw a headline a few weeks ago of a new company that's creating 473 jobs. Well, that's not a lot in comparison to how many jobs we lost, but that's a good sign that builds confidence. And as I've always Econ 101 would tell you that economies are built on confidence, and people make major decisions, major purchases when they feel more confident. When they feel less confident, they're reluctant to make those big decisions. But I think there's a little bit better feeling throughout the country, and certainly so from a national perspective in general, things are improving slowly, but they're nevertheless improving. We do have obviously a solid stock market recovery from 2008. That's extraordinary. Nationally, there are rising rents and larger pool of qualified renters in the marketplace. That makes investing in multifamilies and such more appealing, and the returns better. There is, without question, a pent-up demand from households that have been formed over the past few years that have not purchased yet. Those people will eventually enter in the market when they feel more confident, when they get their job. And obviously, most importantly, we do see, although slowly, some new job creation. So all of those factors it would tell you nationally things are better. But if I were making a decision, I would look very closely at the local market and consult with a local expert.
Well, that's what matters. I mean, what you just said, really. I mean, that question all of us get a lot, right? And you obviously are going to be getting it, I would say, about 100 times a day with regards to what's the real. But you have to drill down on the micro markets. Even in the hardest hit areas of Detroit, there were markets in Detroit. Sometimes it's streets, sometimes it's literally 20, 30 houses that are selling well. There's different little things going on in every single market that, as a real estate professional, that's what you have to know. Even today in Las Vegas, for example, where everyone talks about Las Vegas being one of the hardest hit markets in the country, it's true. There are buildings, there are condo buildings, there are housing areas that are selling like hotcakes. Nobody talks about that, but the local agents who are on the ground actually helping folks find homes, they know where those markets are. Yes, there's a lot of investors out there nowadays. Steve obviously talked about Miami, a lot of investors, a lot of international investors, and a lot of those units are turning into rents. It's interesting that you bring up the fact that rents are on the rise. There was an article that we reported on the fact that at some point we're starting to see the equation get imbalanced, just like there was too much demand and housing prices went through the roof. Now we're seeing what many are guessing is going to be an oversupply of rental units, and that could drive rents down, so reverse the trend. But one thing that is interesting to see is that for the first time, and I think I've researched this, I have a feeling you may have researched this more than me, for the first time ever, people are paying more in some markets for rent than they are for an equivalent house payment. If that's not a surefire sign that things are going to come back around, I don't think you're going to find one. I mean, that's powerful.
Right. That is correct, and your statistics or your research is accurate. But at the same time, I think too, Tim, we would be remiss if we did not say that not every person needs to or should buy a home right now. There's a good reason for people to rent in some cases if they're not planning to stay in a community for more than 1 or 2 years. Maybe they are the perfect person to rent. But when you find a community that you think you want to stay in, that you want to raise your family, that you want to create your memories, that you want to live in, home ownership makes perfect sense. And especially as well, not only the notion, and we sometimes overlook some of the other benefits of home ownership. Certainly in a community, there are vast benefits to why home ownership is so important to a community. The studies absolutely show that when someone buys a home in a community, they become more civic-minded. Voter scores, the number of voters go up in an area. There's less crime in those neighborhoods. There's more, as I said, civic involvement. And what's most interesting, recently there are some very persuasive studies that say that homeowners are more healthy than renters are, and that they achieve and strive for a healthier lifestyle. So there's lots of reasons to think about buying, not to mention there are some wonderful tax incentives to foster home ownership, to help people access the market. Those would be in mortgage interest deduction, is you're able to write off your mortgage interest currently on your taxes when you own a property. And you can, in some cases, write off your real estate taxes that you pay.
Well, you're going into a different topic. Actually, I wrote this question down, and I think maybe we should cover this. Steve and I had a call before this call, and he mentioned 4 really important things. I'm going to, soapbox warning. I'm about to step on my soapbox. I'll be there for approximately 5 seconds. Harris Real Estate University students who know me, you know what I'm about to say. Warning.
I get the sirens ready.
So agents out there, listen, and I mean this with as much passion as I can without sounding crazy. You have got to understand what National Association of REALTORS does for our industry. You have to, as a real estate professional, you have to literally go to their website. You have to go to D.C. at the mid-year conferences. You have to speak to your National Association of REALTORS representative. I'm sure Steve would welcome email from you as well. You absolutely positively have to familiarize yourself with the fact that National Association of REALTORS is quite literally our only voice in D.C. As a lot of you guys know, we worked with NAR for an educational event introducing HAFA. Well, during that educational event, as I was learning more about what National Association of REALTORS had done to develop HAFA along with the Treasury Department, I was told that literally the bank's original proposal to the Treasury Department about HAFA, this is just a small sliver of a, for example, for all of you, that literally the banks had made it in their original proposal about HAFA when they were negotiating the terms with Treasury, that realtors' commissions would become subject to negotiation during the short sale process. Now, I want you to think about what that would have done. How many banks do you think would have just let your commission ride at whatever the percent was on the listing contract? Of course, that would have been a major issue. Of course, that would have turned a lot of agents off to short sales. Of course, that would have slowed the housing recovery. That's just a tiny, tiny little thing that NAR does for us. So agents, you absolutely positively have to get off your collective duffs, appreciate and embrace what NAR does for all of us, and educate yourself, because I've done this over the years. Julie and I have been in real estate forever, and it's always amazed me how many battles go on to defend our industry that we are completely ignorant of because we're so busy working with our buyers and sellers. Steve, right now, I think it's important. You mentioned 4 major legislative issues that NAR is working on. You mentioned, we talked about mortgage interest deduction. We talked about the national flood insurance. We talked about the QRM debate, which still to this day amazes me that agents don't know how important that is. And we also talked about the GSE. So mortgage interest deduction, please help me educate agents on how, obviously they know why it's important, but what is actually going on with that and how that truly is a continual target of the politicians to get rid of that.
Right. Well, mortgage interest deduction, or commonly known in some real estate circles as MID, is a target right now of. Well, obviously, our country is operating with a tremendous deficit, and everyone understands we need to reduce the deficit. The key here is that we do not think that MID is the way to reduce it. First of all, it has a rather minimal impact upon as far as income or revenue that it would generate to reduce the deficit. Secondly, 80 to 90% of all federal taxes are actually paid by homeowners. So this is a target against. This would hurt the very people that are now paying the bulk of our federal taxes. And the notion that sometimes people think that mortgage interest deduction, the benefit of it, is only for the wealthy. Research shows that 2/3 of the people that take advantage of mortgage interest deduction are from households with incomes less than $100,000, less than $100,000. So there are several proposals floating around right now that are concerning. One is, well, right now you can use your mortgage interest deduction benefit for your first and your second home. There is some talk, well, let's eliminate the second home, or let's eliminate the amount that you can actually deduct. Again, assuming that everyone who owns a second home is someone wealthy who does not need to, doesn't need the deduction. Actually, that's not true either. The majority of second homeowners are not these palatial seacoast estates, but the small cottage in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's a hunting lodge. It's a hunting house, a small place. The majority of second homes fit that category, not the lavish upscale category that people often associate with second homes. So it's a major concern, and I will tell you it's something that NAR will defend to the nth degree. We are not compromising in any way on mortgage interest deduction. It is targeted. It will become a point of discussion repeatedly, especially after the election, as Congress gets down to looking at the deficit and how do they address it and how do they reduce it. But I will say, which is also rather interesting, that 73% of all voters say they oppose they completely oppose eliminating mortgage interest deduction. And likewise, 68% of the people say they would be less likely to even vote for a congressional candidate that did favor eliminating MID.
Well, let's stop right there, because that is really the heart of what I'm hoping agents take away from this, is every single agent listening to this interview live and in replay, you guys all have to get it into your heads that it is your responsibility to represent home ownership in your community. So why don't you take a little bit of time, do some investigation on your politicians, on who is running for office, and find out what their stance is on housing. It is not something. I noticed that this mortgage interest deduction debate, it doesn't fall on one side of the political spectrum or the other. Some politicians who are Republicans are for or against it, and Democrats are for or against it, and independents for or against it. So it's kind of confusing. So politician by politician, you have to go through and decide whether or not that is an important issue for you and for your industry.
Right. Well, Tim, you're exactly right, and there are through NAR opportunities when you can make your voice heard through what we call our calls for action. Every realtor, every member of the National Association of Realtors, through their broker, through directly to them, directly emailed to them, they will see maybe 4 to 5 calls for action a year. When NAR begins to feel that Congress needs to hear how their constituents feel specifically on an issue that relates to real estate, they're going to receive this call for action. I would honestly urge everyone to respond to that, because this will, and these other proposals that we'll talk about here in a minute, have not just a vague or unrelated impact on our industry. They have a direct impact on our industry. They have a direct impact on our pocketbooks. This is not talking about something that's philosophical or far-fetched. This is very practical. This is very much bottom line what affects you as a selling or a listing agent.
And so agents, how about this? Not only do you support the politicians that support us, how about you get involved in politics yourself? There's a thought for all of you. So something else.
Agents. So sorry to interrupt you. I'm just hearing agent voices in my head, which is pretty common. That they have this sense of being powerless and frustrated, and gosh, what can I actually do about the things I'm concerned about? So I love what you and Steve are discussing right now, because you're giving them the tools to take action. We're always telling agents, you know what? Don't just say something about it, do something about it. Take some action and take control of what you want to see happen.
So, Julie, you're absolutely right on target. And I will tell you, in the studies that I have been in, and as NAR brings in outside political consultants and legislative consultants, I never cease to be amazed at how they emphasize how important the realtor voice is to Congress. The realtors have a unique position of being completely in touch with what's going on in their community. And when they get a call from a realtor, they know they're getting a call from someone who is in touch not only with their own issues, but in touch with the community and their customers and their clients' issues. So they deeply value hearing from their constituent realtor. And so I would tell you that yes, you can make those calls directly, but you can always channel your voice through, as I mentioned, the calls for action that NAR puts forward, and in getting involved in NAR. If you don't have time to get involved in NAR, that's okay. You pay your dues for the benefit of all of these programs and services. Not everyone has time at certain points in their career to get involved in NAR, but NAR is there to be this voice for you, not only for our industry, but it also is for the homeowner, because this mortgage interest deduction, yeah, it affects us because if it hurts the value of properties or decreases the saleability of properties, that's going to hurt our industry. But who does it hurt first and foremost. It hurts the consumer, and it hurts the people that are living in their homes that aren't in our business whatsoever. It hurts them, and that's why NAR is so unique in that we are the only voice for those people. They don't have a collective voice, but we can give them that, and that's what we do.
Well, so Steve, for example, as far as where the housing headwinds are blowing, we've got this national flood insurance issue that's going to affect everyone. Give them some ideas how to think about what's going on with that right now, since that's kind of a nationwide issue.
Right. Well, National Flood Insurance Program is a program that has been in place for decades. What is interesting, I think some people thought, well, isn't flood insurance really for the people that live on the coast or people that live near a river, and why don't they just move? Flood insurance disasters were declared in every state in the country from 1990 to 2005. For every day there's not a national flood insurance program in place, homes don't close. In a week's time, it's estimated that over 1,300 homes per week nationally will not close if they don't have the benefits of National Flood Insurance Program. What's happening right now is that NAR lobbied for and advocated for an extension of this program. It's been reauthorized time and time again. We asked for a 5-year extension. We received a 6-month extension in December. That extension will expire again on May 31st. If your listeners, realtors, if they would urge their senators and their congressmen to support a 5-year extension. Why is that important in our market? Well, that's important because if you're a buyer of a house that requires flood insurance, if that buyer thinks there might be the possibility of not securing flood insurance in the future, therefore you might not be able to sell the property, or you would have to take a significant loss in selling the property because you can't provide flood insurance. It creates an unstabilizing factor in the marketplace. And that's what's key.
You said something key, and I think you're right. The thinking is amongst agents that non-issue if I don't live on a coast. But the fact is every single state has had some flood where flood insurance would have. I'm thinking of Iowa.
Well, even Vegas floods, and it's in the middle of the Mojave because they can't handle the water when it does rain, right?
Seriously, people don't know. They don't think. Every single one of you who are listening to this interview, you are in some way directly or indirectly, obviously you're selling homes, hopefully you're taking listings. Think about what he's saying. Guys, I did the math. That's 70,000 homes that won't sell per year if this flood insurance is an issue for the sellers or the buyers. That's 140,000 real estate sites. Just putting it into really a direct, I think, perspective that will maybe open all of your eyes to how this is something that you have to be aware of. Again, pay attention to what your local representatives, how they're representing you in D.C. with regards to the housing matters. These things are really important. Now, Steve, here's another one. Now, again, as a result of the Dodd-Frank legislation, there's this wonderful thing that's I think is really baffling many agents that try to understand this. It's certainly stymied a lot of mortgages in more ways than people possibly imagine, and we haven't even felt the full thrust of it yet. QRM, Qualified Residential Mortgage. Tell agents what that is, but I think more importantly, we need to make it really clear that they understand what's going to happen if it doesn't get altered before it goes into effect.
Right. QRM, and there's another definition that is similar. It's called QM, is a part of, as you mentioned, the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Bill, which is also commonly known as the Wall Street Reform legislation. Part of that bill asked that there would be a definition that would be determined. It was not defined at the time the bill was passed, but it's being defined now, of what a qualified residential mortgage was. Well, a qualified residential mortgage means that for the lender, this is a definition that the lender, the banks, are very concerned about, because if a loan does not meet this definition, there's financial consequences for the bank that they have to hold monies in reserve in granting a loan that doesn't meet this qualified residential mortgage definition. The original definition that was actually proposed and credited to the banks who proposed it, they were going to require a 20% down payment to meet the standards or to meet the definition of a qualified residential mortgage. Well, to give you an idea of what that means, in the last 12 months...
And Steve, that's for, sorry to interrupt you, but that's for everyone. Guys, that was the original proposal.
Well, actually, the banks proposed that this definition. It's actually the regulatory end of this legislation that is trying to now define it on the details of the bill that was passed. And so this QRM definition is part of the details that they're trying to work out. Where my point is that if this kind of definition would be put forward, given the fact that in the last 12 months, 69% of all borrowers for homes put down less than 20%, it would have a dramatic impact upon the market if this were the case, because the impact if the loan does not meet that definition could be for the consumer anywhere from 200 to 300 basis points. Or in other words, if rates today are at 4%, if you don't meet this definition, your rate just straight out could be in the 6 to 7% range, not 4% range. So it has a huge impact upon our affordability, and it also is rather targeted because if a definition were to come forward that would require the 20% down payment, that excludes about 3/4 of the African American and Latino borrowers. So it's something that we have built several coalitions of housing advocates, and everyone is expressing their concern. Now, the second definition that you might hear about is the QM definition. The QRM definition is written that affects the banks. The QM definition is qualified mortgage, is really is about consumers. That definition, honestly, we don't have too many issues with. It is what it is, and but it's this QRM definition that is of major concern to the market.
Well, people need to keep in mind and just consider the fact, let's look at the average sale price of a home, just pick a number, I think it's right around $175, in the country right now, maybe a little bit less. And you think, okay, so who's the typical person that's purchasing that home? They're probably somebody with, maybe they're married and have combined income of, say, I don't know, $70,000, $80,000. So they're teachers, they're firefighters, maybe they're people working at Home Depot. It doesn't matter. So if that person has to put down 20%, how long, earning a normal wage, are they going to take to save net, after taxes and expenses, 20% to buy a home? For most people, what this will result in, if this doesn't obviously get, altered dramatically, is it literally will keep them renters their entire lives. There has been a time in U.S. history when that's how it worked, when mortgage financing wasn't readily available, and that is indeed what happened. Most people basically, the thought of owning a home was just some sort of distant dream, not something that really every American who, as Steve pointed out earlier, who should buy a home, what if you can buy a home, you have the financing, you have the financial stability, but boom, you have to put down 20%. It kind of changes the rules, and not in a good way, I think. So, right. Steve, the last thing that we wrote down here that I think is really important that agents understand, there's lots of pieces and parts to this. Fannie and Freddie, they've sort of become everyone's favorite punching bag to blame for the housing bust. Whether it's true or not, I don't think is really relevant for our conversation, but I think that agents need to understand, as the GSEs are reformed, what are the ramifications to our industry? What are you seeing come out as far as what maybe is going to, I hate to use the word, but replace or supplement the GSEs going forward? What are the different proposals?
Well, so from an NAR perspective, our perspective is that GSEs actually perform a very valuable function in the secondary marketplace. in fact, I would say that the GSEs have worked extraordinarily effectively certainly for the last 30 to 40 years. It was only in the last 10 to 15 years that the GSEs became more of a tool of derivatives and a tool of speculation, and as you put it earlier, Tim, greed. So the GSEs actually performed a very, very valuable function. It was the GSEs that actually created the 30-year fixed rate loan. The banks did not create this. The GSEs actually are the ones who sponsored and created this program. So to do away with the GSE, to let it just open market forces prevail in a downturn, in a recessionary time, it would severely inhibit and in fact perhaps completely eliminate any flow of capital to the marketplace if the GSE or something like the GSE was not in place. So NAR's perspective on the GSE is that we do think there needs to be reform. Right now, the GSE, the government-sponsored enterprises, which is basically Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mac and Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, these entities are a unique combination of a government agency, but with an equity basis. So any CEO of any corporation, their number one job is what? To drive the best dividends for their shareholders. We feel that can lead to a conflict of interest, and in fact, that is in fact what happened in the last 10 to 15 years. As regulations relaxed, the GSEs began to want to take advantage of this erratically appreciating market space and this bubble that kept growing and growing and growing and profited from that up until a point when the market stopped growing. Of course, then it deflated, to say it mildly. But it needs to. The GSEs, our model is that we need something like this organization. We don't think it should be an equity-based structure. We think it should be a government based structure similar to maybe the Tennessee Valley Authority would be the best comparison that I could. They have government authority. They're a clearinghouse. They're a marketplace for the secondary market. They are able to create a flow of capital into the markets. So it is, we feel, critical that the GSEs stay in place.
Or, again, as you said, some form of the GSEs, because really at the end of the day, that's people don't, I think agents for a large part don't understand the function that the GSEs perform in the mortgage market, but really at the end of the day, it's safe to assume that if the GSEs in some form weren't around, there would be far fewer banks interested in creating and mortgages, because they'd be stuck holding them. They wouldn't be able to get them insured, and they wouldn't be able to sell them off to the secondary market. They'd have to hold them on their books, which means the banks would have lots of capital tied up for long periods of time at relatively low, returns on their investment. So it really is critical. It's one of the things that when you look at the global housing market, and I think you know that better than anybody else, that's one of the big missing links. You go over to Europe, many parts of Europe, there is no GSE in place, and so guess what? A lot of people never buy a home. They rent forever. So it really is critical if we're going to keep the element of the DNA strong and an American spirit, to definitely have some sort of government backstop. Politics aside, guys, that is just the reality of it.
Right.
So I'm curious.
And again, Tim, one thing I do want to say is that NAR is not a partisan organization whatsoever. We are there. You frequently hear we are there. We represent the Realtors Party. We will get involved in issues where real estate and things that affect the practitioner, our industry. When we see those happening, we will become involved in these issues. But we will not become involved in issues that are partisan in nature. And in any way. In fact, that's probably why one of the major reasons why we are such an effective lobbying group in Capitol Hill is because Congress knows Capitol Hill knows that when the realtors come in, they're looking at realtor issues. They're not there to represent Republican, Democrats, Independents, Tea Parties, Libertarians, whatever party. We are there to represent the realtor party and realtor issues.
And represent American homeowners, ultimately. That's what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm curious, since the real estate market exploded, you've had an interesting perch on our industry. What surprised you the most since just the past 5 or 6 years, since there's been this dramatic housing, you said correction, to put it mildly? What's surprised you the most? Kind of a general question, but I'm curious how you'll answer.
What has surprised me the most about our real estate industry? I think
right.
I think what surprised me is that housing is still, even though it's gone through this terrible period of time, it is still very important to us individually, to our societies, and to our culture. It's important to our nation, and it's not just of economic importance, but it's the realization that housing and home ownership is important to our very society. So I think we've been able to, if you will, rediscover the sociological benefits of housing, not just the financial or economic benefits of housing. That would be number one. Number two, I think that we have realized, and if Dayton, Ohio can be an example, you can make, to realtors, you can make a good living in real estate. No, we're not making as much as we did pre-2006, but we are still, we have a company here of 300 some people. We are making a living at real estate. Why? Because people still need to buy and sell properties. There's still a need in the market, and our business is based on service. So no matter what we do, no matter what the market is, we are there to serve people. And I believe the community, I believe the market recognizes that a good realtor is there to, first of all, service their needs. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, life changes, and so there are needs that come. There's needs to downsize, there are needs to upsize, there are needs to move laterally, there are needs to a new baby, a death in the family, a new marriage, a divorce. I mean, it's all a part of life, and real estate continues. No matter what the economy is. Yes, it's more challenging now, but the need is still there to service people for one of their basic instinctual needs, and that's shelter. And I think we sell more than just a roof that covers your head. We sell a place to call home, and that's a luxury that our country, a luxury. It was a goal of the people that first came to this country, to have their own place, to have their own farm, to have their own piece of land that they could not have had in their homeland.
And
so that's what I've learned.
That's unique to our country too. The pursuit of land, the pursuit of happiness. I mean, if you read the original things that our country's founders wrote, really they understood that power comes from owning land. Power comes from owning real estate. That's where you secure your place on this planet. And that's the nice thing about America. That's one of the truly unique things. And Julie and I have been fortunate enough to travel. We haven't been to Asia yet. We've been pretty much everywhere else. And one of the key elements in the American spirit is the ability to own your own home, the ability to really prosper from owning your own home, to really form yourself and maybe your family and your community. I mean, these are all things that are really important. So another question, I think I ask sometimes this of other people, and I'm always interested to hear what they have to say. Sometimes I'm truly surprised. So looking forward, say you can scale that out to 3, 5, 10 years, whenever you come to mind. What will surprise us? What will be the surprise? What's going to happen in our industry that you think we're really take people by surprise? They didn't see that coming. Anything like that?
Well, in some ways, I hope there is not one of those surprises. I hope we're not blindsided by legislation that could seriously hurt our housing industry, could seriously hurt home ownership. In some ways, Tim, I think what NAR is there to do is to make sure we are not blindsided. There are always going to be new trends. There's always going to be new technology that's going to change or tweak what we do and how we do it. But I would tell you that I would hope that we are in touch enough, and our NAR leaders, which I believe are, they're working realtors. All of our NAR leaders are. I mean, these are people, and the people that are on the committees, and they're working realtors. They're making a living not by being on a committee, but by selling and helping people sell and buy real estate. So I would hope that we wouldn't be blindsided by or shocked by any big surprise that came down the road.
Well, there could be some positive surprises too, and actually from the other folks I've been talking with, people at the banks, people, asset managers, other top real estate brokers, they were all, and you mentioned this too, and I have a feeling this is what you feel as well, that the market actually, not certainly a bounce back or any sort of ridiculous over frothy recovery, but there is a return to wanting to own a home. That people, okay, so maybe they took a step back from the table and they've had a chance to sort of prioritize and rethink about. But well, I'll give you an example. So in Nevada, we went to Nevada State Bank the other day, and Julie was talking to the bank manager, and this was something really interesting, something I never would have guessed. Julie comes, I was waiting for her in the car, and she comes out and she says, "Tim, I just had this most fascinating meeting with this gal." She said that in the bank, Steve, it was busy. And this was Nevada, remember, Las Vegas, worst housing market, all that. So buyers, listen to me, people coming in and out. The parking lot was jam-packed, like they were giving away something inside. And Julie comes out and she says, all those people that were coming in and out, the bank manager was telling her, they're making deposits. They were saving money. They were actually putting money in lock boxes and savings accounts. That's what they were doing. And get this, she said, and this is a little relatively small bank in Nevada, they are depositing $1 billion a day with the FDIC. And the bank manager had said she knows what we do, and she goes, and Julie and her having this conversation about real estate, and Julie asked, well, what's up with that? And she said a lot of these people, what they're doing is they're saving up money to get back in the housing market. They're saving up money to put down significant down payments. Some of them are saving up money to pay cash for a house. Now, see, that's not something that I think that in itself, these aren't investors. These are folks that are probably mostly renting. Maybe they're former homeowners. That desire to be a homeowner hasn't gone anywhere. It's changed, maybe, and maybe people, they're going to be a lot more cautious this time around, but that's what I think is going to surprise people. I think it's going to surprise people how the market does come back with strength.
Well, along those lines, Tim, if there is maybe a potential surprise coming down the road, and that is if there is an uptick in the confidence in the market, and if we see some uptick in jobs and so forth, we're going to see where we have a pent-up demand of people who have not purchased in the last 4 years that typically would have purchased by now. And so that, in fact, could be a factor in seeing prices more than stabilize, but in fact go up a bit in the next few years. But again, those are the kinds of things that the factors are all there. The demographics are all there to support that kind of notion. But today, if you had to make a decision on buying a house, you buy a house because you like it, because you want to live there, because the rates are good, because it's affordable and accessible, and it's a great time to buy right now.
It truly is. So, Steve, as we first of all, I want to thank you again. So, for those of you who are listening to this interview halfway through, we've had the honor of interviewing Steve Brown. He's going to be the president of the National Association of REALTORS starting in 2014. He's the first vice president of the National Association of REALTORS now. I strongly encourage all of you to go back, listen to this interview again, become really familiar with what's going on, our housing headwinds, and also, and I'm hearing from, frankly, hundreds, if not, I'm sure this year will be thousands of agents across the country, and I'm sure Steve is as well. There are definite signs that this is going to be the best housing market that we've seen in literally probably the past 5 or 6 years. Put that in quotes, though, guys. That just means that things are turning around. It's not going to be a bounce back. Reconnect with why people buy homes. That's one of the, I think, the most important takeaways from today's call. Remember that people buy homes for a place to call home. It doesn't necessarily have to get away from the idea that buying a house is like having the golden ticket from Willy Wonka or having a winning lottery ticket. That's not how it works anymore. It's a place to call home, a place where you can, frankly, where you can become part of the community. So, Steve, as we wrap up today's call, again, thank you sincerely for being this week's Harris Real Estate University Superstar. Is there anything that you'd like to say, maybe a question that I didn't ask, a thought that you had during today's interview that you'd like to share?
Tim, the only thing, first of all, it's a pleasure being here with you, and I've enjoyed hearing your program in the past, and it's an honor for me to be a part of it today. I would say only one thing, and that is when I was in Taipei, I was in a car, and we were driving down the street, and a real estate agent, we slowed down. We weren't stopping at a light. Our car just kind of slowed down. A real estate agent came, it was pouring down rain, came flying out. I'm not sure where he was standing, but he came flying out to our car and gave us a brochure on a unit that he had for sale, that he had listed in the building where we were in front of. And I watched this fellow work his tail off in the rain, promoting his listing, promoting his property. If anything, if there's any basis of success in our business, it goes back to just that day in and day out work ethic. And he was so earnest, he was so positive, he was so up. I don't know if he got a client all day long by doing it, but the bottom line is I thought he is going to succeed because he knows how to work. And he's not afraid of work, and that's what we all have to do. We've got to work, and we've got to come in at 9 in the morning or 8 in the morning and work like every other business professional does.
And what an honor it is to be a realtor in this time, in this age, when so many sellers, so many owners have been in so need of agents that are caring and competent and actually know how to get the job done. Fortunately, the order-taking mentality is gone out of our real estate industry and hopefully will never return. And now it's really about being able to make a difference like that fellow in Taipei, really trying to get down to work and knowing how to help someone out of their individual challenge that they might have, be it a short sale or whatever it is. We're going to be doing an upcoming educational event with the U.S. Treasury Department on the Making Homes Affordable Housing Program. Harris Real Estate University students, you want to definitely tune into that one. I think that's going to be very interesting. Again, information that you have to have, because today it's more about what you know than it is about who you know, and, of course, good old-fashioned work ethic. So Steve Brown, first Vice President of the National Association of REALTORS, and 2014 President of the National Association of REALTORS, I want to sincerely thank you for being this week's, that's a mouthful. I want to sincerely thank you for being this week's Harris Real Estate University Superstar. And Julie actually sent me a comment. She had to jump onto another conference call. You know, it is really refreshing to have someone in your position, and I know this is always true with NAR, but it's worth mentioning, who's been there, done that, who's been on the front lines, who knows what it's like to be an agent, who knows what it's like to sell in a real estate market, who knows what it's like to manage a big real estate brokerage. And I am very much looking forward to, a future relationship with you and National Association of REALTORS. And again, I sincerely thank you for your time today and taking the time to share with us your insights in the future of our industry.
It's my pleasure again, Tim, and thank you for having me, you and Julie.
Everyone have a wonderful day, and thank you, Steve Brown, and we'll speak with all of you soon. Have a great day.